This is me and Arlynd doing our stuff together. This is what we want to do, is share information together, share our life together. I am very, very open. He's extremely private. So it's a melting pot, really. it's making everybody happy. Now, hi, Robby. We're going to turn the comments off.
Hey.
Commenting. And you guys can take it away.
All right. Go. Here's the thing. Robby and I will start a conversation saying, hey, what kind of chips do you like? And we end up talking about, solar radiation. So what I'm going to try to do is remember that, selfishly, I want to have the conversations we always have, but we're going to probably be losing people and being like, what are these two crazy guys talking about? What I want to do is help people who are maybe very new to this whole topic understand what are we talking about when we're talking about EMFs. Today, to stick to EMFs as much as we can, if you can go through and now just give a little bit of an education again on the non-ionizing to ionizing, what is actually an EMF, what's happening with the molecule and the atom oscillation, all that fun stuff. So
first off, EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. And so, if we look at the history of the planet, EMF or electromagnetic fields, which is a byproduct of basically either electricity, alternating current, that's AC, which is the kind of current that we use here in the US and basically everywhere, electricity, and or it can be created from a magnetic field that comes from a battery, some kind of battery operated device. So if we look at modern society as we see it today, basically everything that's wireless, everything that is plugged into an outlet and or is able to be remotely operated through a battery is going to generate a field that is not a normal field in terms of what happens in nature. These fields don't exist in nature. There are fields, healthy fields, and wavelengths and frequencies that do exist in nature that have been designed by a higher power, or we see it in nature, and they work harmoniously to support the body and and the plant and animal kingdom. But then man, which is us, step in. And if we, kind of turn back the clock to the days of Moses, Jesus, and Buddha, there wasn't electricity. We wore sandals, or we walked the earth barefoot, so we were actually touching the earth's surface. And so we had a more direct connection with our body has a charge, and most of the people that are listening today will know that like your neurological system works on a little low current that travels from nerve to nerve. And so the brain sends a spark and it goes down your spinal column and it goes down your nerve endings and then it gives signals. And that's all electronic. That's all done by a very low frequency. And so it's super important that our body frequency is in harmony with our environment. And when it's out of harmony or in disharmonious, that's when things start to happen in the negative. And so that could express itself by lowering our immune system and making us more susceptible to getting colds. Or it could express itself by changing what's called your epigenetics, which is your relationship between your environment and also like your gene pool, your RNA and DNA, which is really what we are. It's our blueprint in a sense. And so when we're not in sync electromagnetically with the planet and with nature, then sometimes what happens, Arlynd, is that some genetic dispositions that you already in your blueprint that you may never have come up or surfaced in your whole lifetime now start to come forward, and it could happen that you could be more susceptible to pathogens coming in, for instance, or and I think that kind of explains why some of the trends, the negative health trends for chronic diseases, are as steep as they are and seem to be as expansive as they are. But what scares me the most about the health trends, as we've talked before, is that the age that people are getting sicker is coming down.
Yeah.
And so when you see a 14-year-old woman that tests in clinic that she's borderline sterile, or a young man of 18 or younger that has low testosterone, that is not a genetic expression. That is an epigenetic expression of how our environment, our toxic world that we've created, has affected that individual and all of us as a community and as a nation. So today's discussion is about EMF, because EMF is just one of those contributing stressors. And unfortunately, you know, if EMF was the only thing we had to deal with, our bodies and physiology could probably handle it. But when you add EMF to the GMOs that we're seeing in our foods and the chemtrails that are in our atmosphere, and the change in the water of the earth, the general purity of the water, of the air and the water that we're consuming, when you start to add up all those stressors, it really does have an amazing negative impact on us. And so what I love about our discussion is twofold. One, identify the problem. And today, in this part of our discussion, is really that, like, what are we dealing with?
Yeah. What I'm going to make sure we do is go back to just the simple points. An EMF is an electronic magnetic field force. Those are not all bad, and I think that's one of the things that, because it's becoming a topic that more people are aware of, an EMF all of a sudden just is a negative. Everything that has EMF attached to it means it's killing you. So understanding that EMFs are part of the world we live in, natural and then created, right? That's where we start having the challenge, is what types of exposure to the newer EMFs that are the created, you know, go back to a Nikola Tesla, go back to, where did this stuff start? When did our environment start getting electrically charged or having these frequencies, which is going through and affecting us? And I don't think we touched on that yet, and that's what we're going to get into, but understanding what an EMF is to then how it affects us, that's a big part of what most people don't have the opportunity to learn and understand. It's just EMFs are bad, so we're done, you know, because everything is an EMF, including going to the beach, if you wanted to look at it that way, right? So understanding that doing things that can be beneficial is actually having exposure to EMFs, but the right kind. The biggest problem is minimizing the negative ones. So EMFs are not all bad, but we do want to minimize the exposure to the man-made. So touching on 5G, touching on 2.4 hertz to 5G now, there's different arguments, and I'm actually loving diving into that stuff right now, because 5G has been, you know, vilified as the major problem. And I don't think we're there yet with all the science to say, yes, it is, because there's certain things that would suggest it's not as bad as a 2.4 because it doesn't penetrate as much. And there's other reasons why we'll get into probably some of that stuff. But having towers that are all over the place, yeah, that is going to cause a problem, because there's more of what we're talking about, a negative man-made EMF. Let's get you to dive into, what is it doing to our bodies? How is it affecting the cell?
So our bodies have a natural field that, let's say for today's discussion, kind of hovers right around here. An EMF is about 80 times stronger, oscillates about 80 times stronger than the body field. And so the danger is when you're around a concentration of EMF, and you struck on a really good point because of the amount of concentration of cell towers that are communicating from one to another. So again, if you're out in a rural area or in an island somewhere where there isn't as much, you could have an EMF signal, but there isn't as much of a concentration of the signals, then it affects your body in a different way. And so what happens on a cell level to our bodies is we become out of sync or disharmony. And so our cells don't communicate properly. Our whole electronic system, the neurons and the neurological system, all of those pathways that have been, operating efficiently for many years as a youth, they start to slow down or miscommunicate, misfire. And that's where we're seeing much higher rates of Parkinson's disease and MS, and all the neurological related chronic ailments are now, raging at a much higher level because they get the lack of communication starts to get exaggerated because of the effect of all of these frequencies. And we found a photographer in New York that uses what's called an aura technology to capture auras. And I thought if I could demonstrate what an EMF looked like, then maybe people would get a little better understanding from that. And so what I brought, I have this on my iPad. I'm hoping that the screen can pick it up. Can you see that?
Yeah. If you hold it still, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's what an EMF looks like. And if you notice right down here where my finger is pointing, that is the light from a cell phone. So all of those frequencies are coming off of one cell phone.
Amazing.
So you can imagine when I'm in a conference room where there's 150 or 200, another one looks like going up your stairwell. That's what an EMF looks like. Can you see that okay?
Great. Hang on, hold it still because we're a little glitchy, so I just want to make sure it's got a clear shot. Okay, that's going down a stairwell. Now I got that. Yeah, amazing. Yeah,
pretty crazy, right? And then I'll show you one other one that I find fascinating.
Yeah, as you're pulling that up, I think even touching on, yeah.
And that's your brain, and you've held a cell phone to your head for about a half hour.
Yeah.
And you can see how your brain now has changed color, and the radiation from your cell phone is now affecting your brain, which is affecting all of your ability to think clearly. So I thought that might be important for the viewers to take a look at.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
when
Robby,
I show those pictures
from there, it's just worth making the point again of everything you've been explaining is, first of all, what's an EMF? How is it starting to affect us? But if I put it into just a simple overall, umbrella, your immune system has to respond to something it doesn't recognize. Whether that becomes a friendly or an unfriendly, there's got to be recognition of what is this foreign, whatever it is, object, frequency. So your immune system has to do its job in protecting you. But when we go through constant exposure to EMFs, it's just somebody constantly just going bonk, 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 because it's non-stop. And when that happens, somebody taps you on the shoulder enough, you're going to start being like, dude, what? That's what the immune system does. It's subtle at first, but as we've increased how hard the knock is and how many of these knocks happen, I often, when I'm trying to educate somebody in this topic, I say, just pull up your Wi-Fi networks on your phone. Doesn't matter what brand of phone you have. Pull up your Wi-Fi networks available to you where you are. Go back 10 years, how many was there that you might have access to today? It's shocking. I spent a lot of time in New York City. I spent a lot of time where we are now, in Topanga. It's vastly different. And one of the major things that I see is you don't have enough space to scroll to see how many Wi-Fi networks you could be a part of if you had a password. People don't realize you don't have to have a password to be exposed to what that router is doing. You can't access it, but it is accessing you. It is going through your system and affecting you. So again, going back to these knocks, one is annoying enough. Having two starts getting really big. When you've got 10 of them, you're just getting beat up. That's when the immune system starts getting overwhelmed and says, I can't keep up with everything that's being thrown at me. And you touched on something else. If I just kind of give this stackable view of it, that's only when we're talking about EMFs. We will get into, but we haven't got into what other things is our system and our immune system having to process, having to translate, having to figure out, and what tools are we actually giving it to deal with all of these new things that it doesn't want to deal with, but it has to deal with. How do we create health through that entire process? So I just wanted to kind of loop back and kind of connect some dots there, hopefully, of saying the immune system is the thing that's finally throwing the hands up and going, oh my goodness, it's never stopping. We haven't touched on voltage-gated calcium channels or chains, and that's something that I often touch on, and I'll let you maybe touch on that a little bit, because it gives somebody an understanding of, okay, it's maybe not good for me, it's not great for my cell, but what's actually happening in my cell? Why is the immune system overrun? And then what is the outcome? What happens within the cell that causes dysfunction? Because essentially that's where we're heading, is a system that cannot function is in dysfunction, and hopefully not disrepair. That's some of the tool aspect of our conversation, is creating function again and creating the repair that needs to happen from this constant barrage of just nonstop hammering, right? So go for it.
Correct. So what you just described is the transition from an acute condition to a chronic condition. So if we just had, one cell tower and a few cell phones, like you just pointed out, looking at the networks that are, in New York City, it'll go on for pages and pages, and so forth. And so when you just have a single event or a handful of events, then for the most part, and it's infrequent or less frequent, the exposure, we basically can dismiss it. The body will adjust. When you're constantly exposed 24/7, then it's different. Now you transition from an acute situation, which is just every so often, to constant. And it's like that gnat or that horsefly that's constantly buzzing in your ear and your face. And how could your body function or possibly focus on normal bodily activities when it's so busy defending and war? And so, to your point about 5G, what's different about the 5G networks, besides the concentration of towers that we're experiencing, is the amount, the frequency is so strong, it can pass through cinder block, and the signal can travel almost a half a mile. And so part of our today's discussion is the education, and then hopefully we'll get to talking about some of the solutions. And that I think is super important as part of our discussion. But what's important to know, especially for the young families out there and the mothers, is that you're so careful about protecting your family against things you can see and things you can smell and taste.
Yeah.
If you walk into a room and it doesn't smell right and you have your young kids there, you're probably turning around and going the other direction. And unfortunately, with something like EMF, you can't respond the same way because your senses aren't picking up on that. And so we have to raise consciousness to all people around us, and then offer them ways, once they're aware that this could have an ill effect on themselves and their families, then we have to talk about the simple ways and inexpensive ways that you can work around it. And so when I teach, there's some things I like to say, like for instance, the agencies that are put together by our government to control the frequencies that are wireless devices, that's all cell phones and all RF signal, on a cell level, what you were getting to earlier, each of our cells, first off, the theory behind getting sick, you get well on a cell level and you get sick on a cell level. And so let's talk about how an EMF affects the cell. There's a powerhouse of the cell that's called the mitochondria. And there's also a very, it's a delicate, and you mentioned it before about the calcium pump. There's a very delicate mechanism how a cell operates. There's a membrane around the cell, and that membrane actually is what's called semi-permeable. It's like a breathable membrane, and it allows the cell to get nutrients in and minerals in and nutrition, and it also allows the cell to get rid of all of its waste products. So if the cell isn't communicating from cell to cell properly, then it can't function properly, and that's when things start to go south. So EMF, electromagnetic fields, gets in the way of that communication from cell to cell. And it also changes the body frequency. And as I mentioned earlier, it raises that frequency to a higher oscillating level. And so people aren't grounded anymore, and we need to be grounded in order for cell communication to be proper, and all of those delicate balances that really, I mean, we don't think about it. They go on constantly, trillions of times in, every day. These balances and the relationships in the cell communication happens without us thinking about it. It just does it automatically. But when there's a breakdown in that communication, that's when we start to feel sick of some kind, get a headache, we lose focus, we're having challenges with sleeping at night. It can express itself as even simple things like the way that we digest food. And, if you notice, sometimes people that are carrying an extra 10 or 15 pounds that they normally would not have on them, or they start gaining weight a little bit faster than normal, sometimes people just sort of dismiss it by saying, well, I'm getting older, so my metabolism is slowing down. But in fact, what it could be is something as simple as this extra stress of the EMF that's really interrupting the very delicate balance in the way our metabolism works. There's a fairly notable doctor up in sort of your neck of the woods in the Pacific Northwest area. His name is Dietrich Klinghardt. You probably have heard of him. He, some of my background came from, and why we started creating devices really was birthed out of my daughter's experience with Lyme disease when she contracted Lyme 20 some odd years ago. And Dr. Klinghardt is one of the famous doctors that has done an amazing job in identifying Lyme disease and cancer are his two big areas. And he did a study actually in your area of the world, and he studied 200 patients, and he looked at their blood samples. Right. Now, when you have a microbe, a Lyme disease, or a parasite, in their normal daily living process, they multiply or replicate, they use your body resources, and they poop, okay? And the poop is what's called a microtoxin, and that can be measured in your blood. And so what Klinghardt did was he measured the blood samples of 100 patients that come from the urban areas, like the city areas of San Francisco and, major cities in your area. And then he measured the blood of 100 patients that live in the rural areas, all that have a chronic challenge like Lyme disease. And he saw that the amount of microtoxins in the blood from the patients from the cities was more than 100 times greater than those in the rural areas. Now, if you're from the same area, you're eating the same food, you're drinking the same water, you're breathing the same air. The only thing he could explain the difference in the concentration of the poop, which is really another way of looking at how active these little bugs are inside of your body, right? Was that these bugs are being activated by the cell towers and by these EMFs or these exogenous frequencies. They like that. It energizes them. They multiply more, they use more of your body resources, and they poop more. So here is a real-time expression, a way for us to really look at the effect that these cell towers are and this EMFs are having on us.
I know you've done some of the science on this as well.
We know
I find
is
it fascinating when you look at mold and just do an experiment like we did as kids, right? Take a piece of bread, lay it out, have it exposed to a higher level of EMF, and then do the opposite, minimize that exposure. It's crazy, the difference in how quickly mold appears and then how it continues to do what mold does. So, and I challenge anybody to do that little experiment. Put that by your router or by an area that has a lot of EMF exposure and watch. It's one of the most satisfying things where you don't have to say a lot, but just, there you go, what's actually happening. And it's exactly what you're saying. You're not only energizing, but if you go, different points of view I know and different opinions on it, but it all comes down to you're moving spores, you're energizing spores, you're creating more disturbance, which scatters those things around even more. And it's easy to see on a piece of bread. But when you make the connection, like we're talking about, what's happening in here? What is actually going on? Not only causing dysfunction to healthy cells and healthy communication, but what happens when there's static happening? When we have the glitching we have, even on this live, people I know are going to miss bits and pieces of what you're saying, which is unfortunate. But if there's not clarification at some point, you're going to have a message that doesn't even make sense, and good luck with that. That's what our bodies are dealing with, right? They're dealing with this disruption in communication that leaves the system in confusion, as opposed to, I got the message, I know what I got to do, let's continue to create harmony, balance, and a functioning system. That's what is getting messed up. Mold and Lyme, Dr. Klinghart's science is fascinating to look at, and then there's many other people that are doing that type of work now as well, that you can't get away from the simplicity of it. And that's satisfying, I think, to anybody to say, A plus B gets you to C. Wow, there it is. You can do a deep dive in it and go, okay, why? Why is this happening? That's, to me, where the motivation comes in. What do I do with the obvious that's visible? Now there's some knowledge behind it that's happening within each of our systems. Now what do I do about it?
Right. Yes. Science is going to be surfacing as we move forward. Of course, the 5G is fairly new, but there has been some studies that correlate many of the changes of the bugs, like the flu, influenza, Ebola, all of those outbreaks that we saw historically were very closely tied to the initiation of a higher frequency, like from 2G to 3G and 3G to 4G, and now we're on 5G. And of course, sadly, we're also, somewhat still, all of us are very much affected by the COVID-19 challenge that we're having now. And there might be a correlation. It's probably it's too early for any of us to really know. But if history seems to be repeating itself, the the adjustments that all of us on the planet, all living plants and animals, need to make may take a while, may take a generation before our bodies will actually adjust to the higher frequencies that we're now putting out. And just to dial it up even a little bit more, even though we're using 5G, the governments and the militias, the armies and Navy and so forth, they're already using 7 and 10G networks to send their information. And many of those 7 and 10G networks are mounted on the same micro towers that the 3, 4, and 5G frequencies are sending out. And so again, we can't see it, so we're not reacting to it. Another slide that I don't have with me today that I often show when I'm on stage or in a workshop. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but my wife and I, Melody, and I were traveling through Tucson, and as we're on the road, we noticed that they were erecting a cell tower that looked just like a cactus. Yeah. And so now you're driving along, and they're very crafty, the companies that do this, because they basically want to disguise the cell tower, and so that it blends into the environment. In my home in South Florida, they've got these palm trees and evergreen trees that are really cell towers, but they look like trees. And in the Carolinas, they actually have buildings that look like churches that aren't churches. They're municipal buildings that warehouse cell towers inside of them, in the steeples. So the technology is certainly taking over. There's another, wonderful dear friend, Dr. Stephen Sinatra, who he's a cardiologist by trade, but he's written more than 20 books on electromagnetic fields and on grounding, and big fan of this topic that we're talking about. And he actually saw a correlation between the 2.4 gigahertz portable phones and microwave ovens, which is a frequency, also a man-made frequency, and the higher levels of cancer and heart disease, which is his area, his body of work. And he said, he had a patient that he was tracking that developed cancer. And what she would do when she came home from work was, which many of us, probably half the people that are even listening today, they get home, they're in a rush, they put their food in the microwave, and they're cooking their food, and then they grab their portable phone and they call their friends while their food is cooking, okay? And Dr. Sinatra has shown in his own clinical studies that that's probably the very worst thing you could do in order for you to, create a cancer or, some kind of a malignancy or some kind of a expression, again, that the body is showing that whatever you're doing isn't healthy for what your body considers to be normal. Yeah. So there's no handbook on this. When you buy this technology, there's no major warnings and things on the back of your user guide that even suggests that there may be some problems with it. Like we see on TV with a lot of the medications that the pharmaceuticals companies put out, they'll have 2 minutes of a smiling face and a happy family and a new name for a medication, and then 10 or 15 minutes telling you about all the harmful things it might do. Unfortunately, we don't have the same kinds of warnings and policing, in a sense, on many of the newer technologies that are out there. And as you probably know, I mean, you get it without even knowing you're buying it. Like my wife bought a new coffee pot in our house, and it had a connection to my wireless network, because my coffee pot needed to know exactly what time it was in order for it to make my coffee in the morning at 6:30. Well, while that's communicating back and forth, and I could give a hoot about whether my coffee's on time or not, you know. But the fact is that I've got this device in my kitchen that's generating and pulling these frequencies and creating a disharmony in my home, in my kitchen, and I didn't even realize it until just recently. And so there are some things, in fact, part of the solutions, if we get to it today, would be simple things that we could have the families do just to kind of clean up or become more aware of these devices. In fact, one of the things that I'm, super keen or I emphasize is the quality of sleep we have every night. And most people don't realize that you can turn off your wireless network and you can turn off your cell phone. But most people, what they do is they leave their networks on and they leave their phones by their beds and they have them plugged in charging. And so even though they're not talking on the phone, that phone is still drawing a microwave and a signal close to their bed, close to their heads, when they're supposed to be resting and sleep. Remember, let's go back to Jesus, Buddha, and Moses days. We slept on the earth. We slept in caves. We slept in tents. We lived on the earth. Now we live in apartment buildings and homes. We don't touch the earth, and we have everything plugged in. And so we're not getting the benefit of the earth charge and getting grounded and getting regenerated and sort of plugged into nature in a sense. Instead, we don't get that benefit, but we do get all the other, because all these other frequencies are going on around us and they're happening when we're sleeping. So we're not getting restful sleep. And again, that's kind of cascading into waking up tired the next day. We're not focused. And if in fact, some of the people out there are harboring some chronic health challenge, not having a restful sleep is actually, working against you in building your immune system so that you can fight off many of these diseases and whatever your health challenges are naturally. And so the first place that I go is my bedroom and the areas in my home or in my life that I spend the most amount of time. And I look to kind of remediate and create a safe place for myself and for my family, so that I know at least at some part of my day when I'm not traveling around, that I can recharge my body battery and get myself grounded so that I can actually have an opportunity to sort of get a reset in a way,
So Robby, I'm going to interrupt you for a second because I know we're going to get cut off. And true to form, you and I can ramble for a while. And what I want to make sure we can still do in the time that we have is maybe tie up some loose ends, but draw to some of the solutions. And I know that's what you were headed to. I can't remember what the time frame we have, and I know that's getting short. But if we're dealing with what we're dealing with, that's creating a strain and a drain on our systems, that's causing our immune systems to be overworked, causing all of the things. I can go on and on and on about what are we actually dealing with, from brain fog to, ABCD type things that we're dealing with because of EMF exposure. But also kind of what I said in the beginning, we are two individuals that if there's a challenge, you look for a solution. And thankfully...
You have another 20 minutes. Because remember we started early?
Perfect.
You guys are amazing! I'm loving this! Hi, Robby!
Hi, Robby!
Hi! Don't lift him up too high, he's naked. No, this is amazing. And I'm actually going to be recording this as well so that people can watch it back, because this information is so top level information that is digestible. And it's exactly what I need. So I know a lot of my audience needs it as well. But yes, you guys have another 20 minutes.
Hi.
Oh, hi, want to say hi? Really quick. Hi, Robby.
Hi.
Okay, let's go back.
Oh.
But I mean, they're the reason why we're talking about this, right?
Exactly.
They're the reason. Protecting
It's totally
this generation and our families.
Absolutely.
So important.
It's our
Yeah, you know, obviously when we started, and I mentioned the 2-month-old to the 2-year-olds, there's so much that we haven't. Sorry.
Love you guys.
There's so much that we haven't been able to cover that is so important when you look at the physiology of like what little bodies go through and how that gets penetrated different to what you and I would, right? There's differences. And when you go to your kids and you go to your grandkids and you go to the people that are the generations coming behind us and how much they're affected, there's nothing more motivating for me than looking at that and saying, so what can we do about it? We got not interrupted, but we took that little pause. But what I was saying is there's so much here, even when it comes to analogies to help people understand what's actually happening. You know, I'm throwing one out real quick because to me it's something I throw out a lot and people kind of can wrap their head around it. But we touched on this calcium pump, this voltage-gated calcium channel that has to operate and do its job to create balance. That's a really simplistic way of saying it, but still, within the cell, within the, what the mitochondria is doing, producing energy and creating balance within that working machine, that's what gets messed up. And I often use the example of standing in an elevator, you push the button. If things work, the elevator doors open up, you get in, the door closes, and you say where you want to go, and that's where you go. It doesn't open until you're on the floor that you requested to go to. When it opens, you get out, everybody keeps moving along. Picture now having somebody, after you've pushed the button, just constantly go, door opens again. Door opens again. If that happens 2-3 times because you're waiting for somebody, okay, that's fine. If it's constantly happening, eventually you get out and take the stairs because this is ridiculous. You can't just do the function of what an elevator is supposed to do because somebody keeps putting their hand in the door and the door opens. That to me is very similar of what happens within the cell with that operation that is supposed to happen to let calcium do what it needs to do, close the door again, right? Move it where it needs to go, close the door again. When that constantly gets jammed open, every time it's trying to close, with every frequency that comes in and penetrates that cell wall, it's literally that hand coming in there and the whole channel's going, it's too much. We've got too much going on and they can't close the door. That's where calcification happens within the cell. That's where dysfunction happens. And you have what you started explaining, right? You have not one cell, but an area. If I'm here, if I've got my phone here, where are these areas that were causing the most disruption and the most hand in the elevator door that finally those cells just don't operate as they're intended to? Dysfunction happens. Dysfunction opens the door for disease, whatever illness, new thing. And you know, think of here. You know, why are we all dealing with so much compared to years ago? The things we're dealing with, the conditions we're dealing with, the brain fog we're dealing with. Obviously, it's around us, but what are we also putting, you know, the Bluetooth earbuds right now? I'm going, no, no, get those away from your brain. But we have a lot of exposure in new ways that are causing these problems. Understanding what the cell's going through, why there's dysfunction, is hopefully motivating enough to say, okay, if that's going to stop the cell from doing what a human cell is supposed to be able to do, there's going to be a problem. And that's what we're seeing more and more and more around us. How do we now move into making sure those things don't go down the path of dysfunction? You've touched on it a couple things already. Turning off exposure. So we have remote controls, which is RF, right? But remote control to turn off your Wi-Fi router. Because I don't care what people say, and it comes up a lot, what if somebody's trying to get a hold of me? You're sleeping until you wake up and go, is somebody trying to get a hold of me? At that point, if you really feel like I need to know if somebody's trying to get a hold of me, flip on your router with a remote. It might take 15, 20 seconds for it to get there, but I'd far rather be able to turn off and on that constant exposure that's bathing your environment causing the hand to come in the elevator door for all of those cells. Why not minimize that? Going back to what you said, why not now give the system, our human system, what it actually needs in that sleep cycle? That's when we repair, restore, create hormone balance. All of that has to happen for you to wake up the next day, have a brain that works, have a body that works. I'm simplifying it, but the communication has to be optimal. When we constantly are bathing ourselves with all of these different devices like Alexa, like, I'm not against technology. I absolutely love technology. But if technology is producing constant barrage of these signals that are creating dysfunction, there's got to be a way that we can move through that, harmonize those signals if that's possible, eliminate them when they don't need to be there, and hopefully remove yourself from the environment if you can't actually harmonize or minimize what's there. Cell phones are a great example. If I'm on a call, 99.9% of the time I'm out here with speakerphone or a wired headphone, because I don't want to hold this thing close to me. It's kind of like the microwave thing. Most people can understand, do I want to go put something in a microwave? I've used a microwave for almost 20 years. But if I was going to use a microwave, am I going to put food in there and just go lean on it because it's warm? Most people know something's wrong there. I probably don't want to do that, even if you don't understand what's going on. There's that kind of innate intelligence that says that just doesn't fit. Microwaves and hugging them to get a little warmer, most people wouldn't do that because they feel like that's wrong. I will go stand by a fire. So I'm getting off track, but you know where I'm going with this. How can you then choose to eliminate the things when they are not needed?
Well,
hopefully eliminate them altogether if they're just flat out not good for you. And can we harmonize some of those things to produce positives?
yes. Well, let me start by saying that I love your analogy. And just to take it one step further, so now you've got this annoying person that keeps the elevator door from closing. But what's the next event? If that goes on long enough, you miss your appointment.
Absolutely.
And then if you miss that appointment, maybe you miss a great opportunity. Now just think about that in terms of your body function. When your body function is upset, imbalanced, confused by these exogenous frequencies, the EMFs and extreme low frequencies, which is called dirty electricity, or RF, which is wireless and Bluetooth and all that, then it affects the body system on a cell level, but that cascades into potentially a problem with your gastrointestinal system, your body's ability to digest food, your brain's ability to function, like you said, brain fog or loss of focus. And then energetically, the lack of sleep and so forth and so on. Anyway, so there are real cascading events that occur, but again, it starts on that cell level. And then what we can do is we can fix this. And so traditionally, there are basically three ways to protect yourself against electromagnetic fields. You can block them, you can shield them, and the one that I'm the most excited about these days is what's called harmonizing. And you just touched on that word before, and that word resonates for me in many ways, because basically when you're in harmony in your body and you're in harmony with nature and with your environment, then things progress in a much more natural way, and that end result is basically a healthier, happier, a person with more well-being. And then again, follow your bliss, or find your purpose, and really add that contribution that really I think that we were all meant to experience while we're here on what I call Earth Camp. So we're here on Earth Camp for a short period of time, and while we're here, we have a purpose. And why let something like technology get in the way of our health to prevent us from realizing that purpose? So in the past, and there are some technologies out there that are very good, that do a really good job at both shielding and blocking. But the challenge I've always had, and we started this, in fact, we've been remediating electromagnetic fields for more than 15 years on all of the devices that my company makes. Mostly because I want our customers to enjoy all the beauty of harnessing full spectrum infrared frequencies and not having to deal with the conflict of EMF and infrared, frequencies together in the same device. So if I am able to remediate and take EMF off the table for discussion, then you can really absorb and enjoy all the really great benefits of all the things of the intent that we're doing, meaning. But the problem with shielding and blocking technology is that it's always kind of reactive. You come out with 3G and then you dial up your shielding and your blocking, and now everything is integrated on 3G, and by the time you get that in your products and you get it out to your customer, then they come out with 4G. And then you got to dial it up again. And then they come out with 5G. And so it's always a half a step behind the technology because the money is in a faster network, not in fixing the health problem that's related to a faster network, okay?
Yeah.
So now harmonization is a whole other area that's so beautiful because it brings you in harmony with whatever frequencies are being thrown at you. And so this might be a little out.
Love. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying, this might be out there, a little out there for, people listening today. But if you can imagine, like in the 60s, it was called an aura. You have an aura about you, And then they came out with this technology, like I mentioned earlier, that we filmed the EMFs. It's called Kirlian technology that actually captures that image, that aura. Okay, and that aura is what's called a biofield, and we all have those around us, this field, invisible field of energy that surrounds all of us, and you can measure that. There's different technologies that actually can measure that, the expansiveness of that field. And so your little toddlers that just came in, their biofields might extend close to 700 feet around them, outside in like a bubble of a field around them. And we're lucky as adults if our field can extend the length of our arm, which is basically 3 feet. Now, when you get an exogenous EMF or dirty electricity that comes into us, what the body does to defend itself is it collapses that field for protection. It's a shield that protects us. And what harmonization technology does is it fortifies that shield. So it's proactive. So whether you're in a hot spot like at a Starbucks getting coffee where there's a lot of frequencies, or you're in a room with a lot of computers, or you're in 5G and maybe higher frequencies than that, if you surround yourself or use technology, harmonization technology that builds the shield, then your body is under less stress. And that's truly what I believe is the answer to where we're going with the new tech and the way to protect our families and ourselves from these frequencies that we can't see or sense in any way.
Yeah. And to me, that is the game changer. If people were with us in the beginning of this conversation, that's what I said I love about your approach, how I feel like my approach is, what I strive to have my approach look like is, what are the challenges, but how do you create a positive, not avoid, don't deal with, don't look at, actually look at what is there, what is causing the challenge, and how can that become part of the fabric of who you are or how you operate, or now what your forward steps look like, not trying to eliminate in a run from way, but understand why that challenge exists, understand can that be turned into a positive, and how do we make that now something that, like what you just said, with this technology, how do you actually turn the negative into something that can become a positive? I mean, that's a beautiful thing, and
Okay.
to me, the psychology
Well,
of how we work, right? That's growth. That's what I hope most of us would strive for, is use what challenges that have been presented in your life to become stronger, to become wiser, to become something that creates positive for yourself, but also for others. So the technology that you are deep into now, I love, because that you can go different directions with it. It's philosophy, but it's also function, right? It's something that says, yeah, that sounds like it would be something I'd want to do, but if I can then stack these blocks on top of each other and I can be building that positive, there's something really satisfying about having a tool. I'm foreshadowing, plugging something in, doing something that says, there, I took a negative, I know now that shifts that into being a positive. It's an amazing thing to be able to do. So can you explain that a little bit, as much as you want? I know we don't have a lot of time, and I want you to touch on a couple of the other things. We're definitely going to have other conversations. This was kind of an intro to a lot of stuff, but we'll dive into some specifics over the next while. But for today, if you can just touch on some of that.
Super exciting for me. Well, let me go back to this picture again. We can see this. Can you see it?
Yeah, now, yep. Yeah.
Okay, so if you look real closely, you can see that the frequencies, and they're traveling in a counterclockwise fashion. Okay, that was one of the things that we noticed 15 years ago in my laboratory. When things travel, when energy travels in a counterclockwise fashion, it basically pulls your body energy, it draws your energy from you, depletes your energy. That's why people, when they're traveling in cars, they get tired after traveling a long enough distance because they're drained, because basically these frequencies are pulling their energy. And so one of the things that we did with our early levels of remediation, and we're seeing now with harmonization, is we can actually change the direction from counterclockwise to clockwise. So rather than drawing and draining your power, it's actually reinforcing and supporting your body function and cell power. Yeah. And so it's subtle, like this energy is very subtle, but it makes a huge difference in when you add it up over time. And remember, your analogy is so perfect because it's not just a single event, it's a constant battering and battering and battering and battering and battering. And then again, it starts to create that negative experience. So so what we did, it started about maybe close to 3 years ago. The most advanced work that we're doing is that we have identified more than 100 frequencies that happen in nature that support health and well-being. And then through technology, we're able to take those single or identified frequencies, and we can actually imprint them, or in a sense, kind of like record them onto a medium, one where you can, it'll look like a little sticker. I have one here. You can see I have it on the back of my iPad. Can you notice that one right there?
Yeah, not great, but yes.
Okay. Okay. So this hologram, and it carries different colors. Can you see the colors on that?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay. And so we have actually imprinted or recorded more than 100 frequencies on that medium. And now this device, my iPad, is completely protected when I hold this near my body is protected.
Yeah.
And so I'm not fearful that whatever wavelengths might be whirling around in my room that I can't see, as long as I have this close to me, I know that my body field is going to be supported, and that I won't have that annoying proverbial door trying to close in the elevator, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to have improved communication,
Yeah.
and on a cell level, which then cascades into general health and great well-being, good brain communication, to all of my nerve endings, to all of my bodily functions, to all of my muscles, to all of my different systems that are so dependent on good communication between your brain, down your spinal column, through all your nerve endings. And I know that I am in an optimal position where I am maximizing my body energy every single day.
Yeah.
And the beauty of all this stuff is that it's affordable. Like, everybody thinks it's out there, I can't get it, and it's not like that at all. You can easily attain these. We have a full breakout of devices for the home and for your cell phones and for your pads and laptops and so forth. But there are other companies that do good work in this area. And the important thing to know is that you can't live in today's world, modern world, and not be aware that these silent frequencies that we cannot sense in any way have no effect on our daily lives, and mostly on the lives of our little ones. And that's such an important thing, because you wouldn't feed your child a bad meal. You wouldn't feed your child water that wasn't healthy. So why have them in an environment where they're getting unhealthy frequencies around them, and have that affect the way that they perceive the world and the way that they are growing, how they're growing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge message that has to touch everybody's lives.
Yeah. And it starts with education, understanding what are we dealing with, moves into, okay, understanding now, what can I do about it? And, as you know, Angi and I are very, very picky on who we do business with. And I think it's worth having a quick clarification, because unfortunately in this space, there are a lot of paid for ads. Angi and I have not done a paid for ad, because when you're dealing with people's lives and human health and any type of human health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, go down any path, you're dealing with people. Obviously, we're living our journey and doing the best we can. And, my side is a lot more on the deep diving and the education. That's been my history, and that's my passion. But people are the end result of all of that. People are the why behind learning everything I can to affect people positively. So if we're choosing a product, it's going to come back through the funnel of saying, yes, that's affecting me, and I've done the research on that, and I understand it well enough to know this is my why, and why I'm going to make sure my kids have access to that, my loved ones have access to that. But we also touched on, we're all here for a reason. We are here for a purpose. That's my belief. My belief is my purpose is to educate and to give people tools that can create a positive. That's my goal through this, and that's my goal in getting you to share your path, your journey, but also the technology that you've been working on and where you are now, because it's such an important time and such an important product line that people can have access to, that isn't this thing that's just like, well, that's great, now I know I'm screwed, but I can't do anything about it. Yes, you can, and there's a lot of different options. Going back to, most people understand calcium has been pushed for years, right? Get enough calcium. Your body can't do anything with calcium if it doesn't have the right amount of magnesium. One of the easy things you can do is take a good magnesium supplement. Add that to your nutrition. That is going to help with some of the issues that we're dealing with the annoying elevator door that can't shut, right? Too much calcium. Magnesium can help with that. It's not going to stop, it's not going to go to the level we're talking, but is it something that's pretty cheap? It's an actionable step that you can do. There's many of those, and we are going to get into those, not today, but we will get into some more of those to point people in a direction of saying there are positive change tools that you can actually implement into your daily practice. But when it comes to being able to have technology and a tool that you have, that is what I want to continue to point people to, not as a paid ad, as this is a shared heart, because we want to change the most lives for the positive and see our world change for the positive. And why, I mean, it's just kind of funny, the harmonizing side of everything that's the goal. You know, we all have plenty of differences. We all have a lot of things that we could focus on why we might not see things the same. How about let's try and focus on what we can come together on? How about we focus on what can we create
Right.
our world, whether it's our little bubble, but expand then from that bubble. How do you create the most positive world we can create? Focus on things that create harmony, as opposed to separation and dysfunction. We're going to find that. That's easy to find, right? But if we focus on harmony and focus on how do we come together in areas, there's going to be a positive change. So when it comes to every cell in our body, harmonization it's a no-brainer. So the fact that you have those tools, I'm just so thankful for, like I said in the beginning again, that we cross paths, but that your path and our path just beautifully come together to say, here's a product, here's the heartbeat behind both sides that we can educate and get in people's hands to have the positive change that we all desire. So thank you for your path and your journey and your product.
Thank you. I am truly divinely driven, and I feel very fortunate that I am able to harness my knowledge and my research and able to express it in easily understood, affordable devices that really are game changers in terms of supporting your health and well-being. For more than almost 20 years, about 18 years, I've focused on chronic ailment, chronic challenges. Lyme disease was a big topic for us because we had personal experience there. But the area I'm getting the most charge out of these days are the optimal health guys, like the millenniums and the people that are healthy and want to stay healthy and are looking for honestly, I can move the needle very, very quickly on someone with a chronic challenge, but get them closer to the middle of the road, which is like giving them their lives back. And there's so much joy for me in that area of work in healthcare, coaching and working with doctors to teach them, and also with patients directly, But the optimal health, the people that are searching for just the best methods to stay healthy, I love that category because of the energy and what amazes me about it. And what amazes me on this topic of EMF are how many people are still unaware of EMF and the negative effects that it could have on you, and also the very simple solutions and ways to work around it. And so, us getting together, is just clandestine. Having, our relationship and having the voice that you and Angi put out to your network as an opportunity for me to be able to share some of my life experiences and the things that we've seen both in clinic and in practical application is a real joy. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be on with you today, and hopefully more times in the future about all these different topics, because we are traveling on this road together, and it's so important that the people that we're surrounded with, the lives that we touch every day, it's so meaningful to be able to really make a difference for them. And even if we just touch one person today, I'm completely satisfied. So thank you so much for the day and the moment.
Absolutely, and I'm saying this to those that are listening. Again, going back to the heart, being able to share and educate, to point people in a direction of creating positives from what appears to be an insurmountable challenge or a negative. That's the heart that Angie and I have, that's the heart you have, and that's why I know we're going to do a couple more of these that address a lot of the things that, I shouldn't say, people understand there's challenges. A lot of times they don't understand what's the source of the challenge. Why is this showing up?
Right.
That's something that I really want to get into, and we will. But as an overview of today, having people understand what is one of the things that most of us can do something about pretty quick, pretty cost effectively, and to make a significant change in your overall health. That was why I wanted to start today with you on this topic. You're extremely knowledgeable in the area. You've worked in that area for a long time. I've done deep dives for 20 years in this area, and I wanted to start having people that maybe need some help understanding what are we dealing with, where is this going, understand, don't be so discouraged by what a lot of the science says. Understand that there are tools and there are ways to move through this, to embrace technology, understand how to use it, understand what to do with it when you're not using it, but not live in a bubble of fear and everything around me is going to kill me. Not if we can do something about it, create harmony, and make that all now a positive. I love technology, I said that before, but knowing how to use it, knowing what to do to continue to allow it to be a positive is essential. So thank you for the time today. Thank you again for everything. People are going to think I have a massive crush on you because I do. I love you, Robby. I do. And I love your heart. I love the way that you have, shared with me through the journey that you have been through from personal to professional. I have a lot of respect for you, and I appreciate so much the fact that you have that heart of touching people's lives and not pricing a product that makes it unattainable, but saying, how do we get this in people's hands? Where do we price a product to make sure most people won't have a problem doing that? That says a lot about the heart behind who you guys are as well, and I appreciate that. And I know
Thank you.
Angie would be saying the same thing if she's here. So we are going to have a discount code as well for our listeners, for Angie's listeners. And you guys have been gracious enough to do that, to again, just go back to getting what you have created into people's hands to create the positives. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And hopefully we'll be on another call sooner than later. Well, it'll be soon. It'll be sooner.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, keep up the good work.
You too.
And love the mission, and glad to be having my my little wagon connected to your train.
I hear you. It might be a different perspective, but I hear you. Love you, Robby. We'll talk soon.
All right, guys. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.